And welcome to the final screencast for Chapter 10. This is still under the category of factoring x squared plus bx plus c. But in this screencast, we're going to learn how to solve quadratic equations using factoring. If you think back to past chapters, we've solved quadratic equations through graphing, and we've solved them using the quadratic formula. This is another strategy that we can use to kind of find the same answers. We're trying to find the 2 points where the graph of this this parabola, this quadratic equation, where that graph would intersect the x-axis. And so here's how we do this for these type of problems. I wrote down 4 notes here. The process is to solve a quadratic equation. To solve this quadratic equation, you need to set the equation equal to 0. Then you need to make sure your terms are in order. Then we'll factor the equation. And then finally, we'll use the zero product property to solve for the values of the variable. That may not mean a lot to you yet, but watch what we do here. Here's my equation. X squared plus 100 equals 20x. I have to first set this equal to 0. So I'm going to subtract 20x from the right side and rewrite the equation. So I would have x squared plus 100 minus 20x. And now that's going to equal 0. So that's the first step I'm going to do. Well, that's pretty good, but my terms are not in order. I need to rearrange this so it's x squared, then the x, and then the 100. So x squared. Now I'll move the negative 20x first, so minus 20x. And then the plus 100 comes next. And moving these around and keeping them in order, we can do this. This is part of the commutative property. As long as we keep the sign in front of the number, we're good to go. So x squared minus 20x plus 100 equals 0. That's the first thing that I want to try to do. Now that I have that in standard form and it's set equal to 0, I can factor this. So I got to figure out some number, x plus or minus some number times x plus or minus some number. So what two numbers multiply together to give me 100 that add up to give me 20? Let's see here. I haven't thought about this too hard yet. Thinking like 50 and 2, that's not going to work. How about 10 and 10? 10 times 10 is 100. 10 plus 10 is 20, but this is a negative 20. So that tells me that I have to have x minus 10 times x minus 10. That'll give me the negative 20x in the middle, and negative 10 times negative 10 is 100. So this still equals 0. Now, as we did on the board earlier in the week, what we're going to do now is we're going to take each of these little parentheses and set them equal to 0. They happen to be the same this time. It doesn't always work out that way. So I'm going to take x minus 10 and set that equal to 0. And then I would take the other one, which is also x minus 10, and set that equal to 0. You don't have to do it both times in this situation. I am just to kind of help clarify. You solve each of these little equations, x minus 10 equals 0. I'm going to add 10 to this side and add 10 to this side. And I'm going to get an answer of x equals positive 10. And on this equation, when I solve for x will also be positive 10. So I can move over here, solve that, and say x equals 10. And value 10 is the solution. It is the one and only number that can go into this equation for x and make it true. Many of these times, these problems will have 2 different answers. This one only happened to have 1. Alright, let's try one more yet. I think I have time to do this. And this one looks a little bit different. We have negative x plus x squared equals 56. So like we did over on this problem, the first thing that we're going to want to do is set this equal to 0. So I'm going to subtract 56 from the right side. So I would have negative x plus x squared minus 56 equals 0. My next move is to rearrange these terms so that in the order from x squared to the single x to the non-variable term. So x squared minus x minus 56 equals 0. Sounds good. Now we have to take this equation and we have to factor it. So what two numbers multiply together to give me negative 56 and would add up to give me negative 1? I'm thinking about negative 8 and positive 7. Negative 8 times positive 7 would be negative 56. Negative 8 plus 7 would be negative 1. So x minus 8 times x plus 7 would be the factored form, and that still equals 0. that would multiply together and give me x squared minus x minus 56. And then using the zero product property idea, we're going to take each of these little parentheses, these little binomials, and set them equal to 0. So x minus 8 equals 0, and x plus 7 would equal 0, and then solve for x. In this first equation here, add 8 to each side. X is going to equal 8, and on the right side, you'd subtract 7 from each side, so x will equal negative 7. My final answers then for this problem would be 8 and negative 7. Those are the two values that can go into this original equation, and if you calculated it out, it would give you a true statement. Hope that helps explain a little bit how to use factoring to solve quadratic equations. We'll try this in the next day in class as well. Good luck. Thanks.